now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. Here's Reverend Martin.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. My name is the Reverend Nathaniel Wayne Martin. I'm the pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church of Los Angeles, here in the great city of Los Angeles. I should have said New Life Institutional Baptist Church of California, which is our nonprofit status. But that's neither here nor there. We're located at 8916 South Main Street. We're worshiping with our sister church, the Shiloh Missionary Christian Church, and which is pastored by my good friend, the Reverend Dr. Della F. Holliness. They always say when the Baptists and the Charismatics get together, there's always going to be a shouting in the camp. I would like to welcome you to our offering, to our presentation at this time, which is entitled, above all things, It's Time. And you might well ask, what is it time for? Why, I'm glad you asked. It's time for justice, my friends. In all aspects of social justice, that must involve, of course, environmental justice, because our sociologists have taught us and impressed upon us the impact that your environment has upon your health, upon your learning, upon your growth, upon your psychology, upon all aspects of your existence, which stands to reason. Your environment is important. And since most of our environments have been environments that have been surrounded by industrial waste and pollutants and just downright toxins and poisons, by we, I mean we black people. That's where we mostly have had to find our abodes, in those type of areas with those type of smells and those type of chemicals, because they would not allow us to live in the beautiful suburbs where we live now. That's why I feel that we must have reparation, because if America had been honest and had been true, even in the early part of the 20th century, we wouldn't be where we are now. We'd be much further along. We would be all singing Kumbaya and doing high fives, because we would have had access to the government-backed Federal Housing Administration loans that started the suburbs. We would have access to the GI Bill, which the returning soldiers from World War II received. We would have had access beginning in 1935 to the Social Security, rather than being relegated or left out, rather, because most of our people were on the farm or were working as domestics in some white person's house, and our wages were sometimes down to $5 a week or less. We just wasn't making it. Weren't allowed to make it. And so, like I said, if we had access to good, decent jobs and wages at that time, really we've been paid a decent wage, even on the farm, or even as working in someone's house. But of course, that's neither there, because we were not paid a decent wage. So you could work as hard as you could. You could work your everything off, work your behind off to be nice, but you still weren't gonna give it the same $5. And so you can see why the wealth gap and the other social health disparities are so prominent among our people. That's why we need, and we must push, and we must keep on the agenda and the conscience of the nation, the need for reparations, dating back originally to those unpaid compensations from those 246 years of unrequited toil. And if you want an example of the fact that hard work don't pay off, don't look no further than slavery, because if hard work by itself was all it took to make it in America, every slave coming out of slavery would have been at minimum a millionaire, if not $2 or $3 million, for all of those years of hard work. 246 years. Abraham Lincoln rounded it off to 250 years of unrequited toil, in a very poetic expression, or eloquent expression. But the point is still made. You didn't get anything for all that hard work. Our scripture for backing up our reparations. This comes from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 15, beginning at verse 12. Hope I got this thing cut off so it won't ring. It says, if thy brother and Hebrew man, and by extension, or if thy sister, a Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee and serve thee 6 years. You must contrast that with the fact that we were slaves for 246 years minimum here in this nation, beginning from 1619. In the 7th year, work 6 years, the 7th year, get ready to be set free. Thou shalt let him or her go free from thee, and when thou sendest them out free from thee, thou shalt not let them go away empty. Why, that is quite a contrast to how the Negro was treated in America at the end of the Civil War. I say the end of the Civil War because in Texas we didn't find out about the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. We didn't find out till the end of planning in 1865. General Granger came down there in Galveston, Texas, and all of a sudden called all of the Negroes and the slaves together and told them, say, y'all free. You've been free since 1865. And the Civil War is over and the Union won. So you are free. And but it was a freedom, as Dr. King described it, a freedom to hunger, a freedom to famine, a freedom to be shiver in the cold and be released to the heat of the summer without any credit, without any job prospects, without a homestead, with nowhere to go. It was a very empty freedom that was handed to the formerly enslaved. And so that is why we arrive at where we are at this moment, where you're looking at me with incredulity, saying you're asking us for reparations. Yes, I'm not just asking you. I have to remember, I pay property tax and federal income tax and sales tax and all the other types of taxes as well. But I don't mind pooling my money with yours because we're going to all make this country a better place to live in. And yes, we must have reparations. You can't be free, you can't be blessed, you can't be what you would be until that debt is acknowledged. You always looking over your shoulder, you're afraid what the black man or the black woman is going to do because you know if they had done to you what you did to us, that it would be retribution and revenge would be on the table. But of course, we have followed the Christian doctrine, the doctrine of love, as the late Congressman John Lewis opined. We didn't come to hurt anybody. We came to express love. And so we have this great debt that America owes, and that debt is growing, and it must be satisfied. By some estimates, that debt has grown to $52 trillion with a T dollars. And you better be glad it's us that you owe it to, because we're not going to break the country, but we must put in our check, as Dr. said Dr. King's opined in his I Have a Dream speech there in Washington, D.C. We have a right to make a demand upon the Bank of Justice for the security of freedom that was guaranteed to all men in order to make this a more perfect union. If we're going to have a more perfect union, then everybody in these United States, even Elon Musk admits that, we must all have a guaranteed income. Dr. King said we all need a guaranteed income because of the fact that we have in the United States a lot of what you call redundant people, what the South Africans call surplus people that you don't need because you got so many of them. With the advent of robotics and the like, type of inventions, technological advances, why jobs that frequently required many people now only require a few people. Used to be you had to have a bunch of folks to dig a ditch. Now one man and one machine can dig a ditch and dig it straight, dig it square, dig it to the dimensions that you want, and be done in half an hour or half a day. And so life has changed. We were driven out of the cotton field by the cotton picking machine. Now the cotton picking machine, a man can go out there with a cup of coffee with his cooler and get up in that big old thing, and he can spend all day out there. And not only will the machine pick the cotton, but now the machine will bale the cotton. So the innovations have just proliferated, and as a result, a lot of jobs that the poor used to could do and make a good living out of it, those jobs are no longer there now because of the fact that we were, of course, defrauded on the farmland. Those of us that own farms were defrauded out of those farmlands or driven off of the farmland, sometimes violently. But if you withhold the loan, if you withhold what the black farmer needs to put his crop in the field, that's violence too, because you're setting him back. Other people is harvesting their crop, and the black man still waiting on you to give him the loan that has been approved, by the way, to put his crop in the field. No, the black man has been defrauded on every hand, not just through slavery, but through sharecropping, and like I said, through the farming, because naturally, if the farm board, the farm commission, was populated only by the local white people, and they were, then of course the white folks looked out for the white folks. So if you were not white, then you wasn't looked out for. You were set up, to fail, and then the folk would scratch their heads and wonder why you didn't do it better, because we sure made you the loan there. It was approved. But my loan was approved, but I didn't get my loan in time to buy the seeds or buy the equipment or put up the buildings that I needed to farm in order to bring in the crop or raise the hogs or raise the pigs and chickens and things that were necessary. Everybody knows that farming is a type of endeavor where every year you have to borrow in order to get started. And so there you go again, borrowing. Who gets the loan? Well, the same people who always got the loan. So then who did not get the loan were the same people who customarily did not get the loan. I would like to call your attention to the original excerpts from the original March on Washington speech that the late Congressman John Lewis did not say in his speech. His speech was highly redacted and edited at the behest of the Catholic Archbishop and at the behest of the Kennedy administration, who felt that his speech was too incendiary. I'm going to read you what he would have said had he been allowed to finish his speech. Here are some key excerpts from the original speech. Here's John Lewis, what John Lewis meant to say. In good conscience, that's what John Lewis said, we cannot support wholeheartedly the administration's civil rights bill. Remember, Kennedy was trying to push a civil rights bill, but it was a watered down one. Listen to John Lewis. For it is too little and too late. There's not one thing in the bill that will protect our people from police brutality. And he was one who knew about police brutality. But let me not digress. The voting section of this bill will not help thousands of black citizens who want to vote. It will not help the citizens of Mississippi, of Alabama, and Georgia who are qualified to vote but lack a 6th grade education. One man, one vote is the African cry. It is ours too. It must be ours. And again, remember, this is what was not spoken at the march on Washington for fear of being too incendiary and too revolutionary. And as a matter of fact, they found out later on that the police department of Washington, D.C. had somehow got control of the sound system so that if somebody's speech got too incendiary or too, too incendiary or too revolutionary, they could pull the plug and make it wonder, well, what happened to the sound? I continue. People have been forced to leave their homes. This is John Lewis talking, because they dare to exercise their right to register to vote. What is there in this bill to ensure the equality of a maid who earns $5 a week in the home of a family whose income is $100,000 a year? Can you imagine that? That's why I said if hard work was all it took, every Negro would be a millionaire. Every Negro coming out of slavery would be a millionaire. Every home worker, homemaker, housewife would be rich. Let me not stop. In John Lewis speaking again. In some parts of the South, we work in the fields from sunup to sundown for $12 a week. In Albany, Georgia, 9 of our leaders have been indicted, not by Dixiecrats, but by the federal government for peaceful protests. But what did the federal government do when Albany's deputy sheriff beat attorney C.B. King and left him half dead? What did the federal government do when local police officials kicked and assaulted the pregnant wife of Slater King and she lost her baby? You see how incendiary that would have been? How insightful? Well, he would have got the crowd going. To those who have said, be patient and wait, we must say that patience is a dirty and nasty word. Now, it was this phrase, this line, that the Archbishop, what was his name? Archbishop Hannah, Philip Hanna, who was the Catholic Archbishop of Washington, D.C., and he was going to give the invocation, but he got a hold to a copy of John Lewis's speech and read it, and he said, I'm not going to get up there and give no invocation prayer with this type of incendiary language in this speech. You got to cut this speech out. It must never see the light of day. And as a result, A. Philip Randolph and Martin Luther King Jr. and Bayard Rustin had to get behind the Lincoln Memorial in the guard shack and help John Lewis rewrite his speech to take all this good stuff out. Be patient and wait. We must say that patience is a dirty and nasty word. Well, that's one of the principal tenets of Catholicism, is patience. We cannot be patient. We do not want to be free gradually. We want our freedom now. We want our freedom, and we want it now. We cannot depend on any political party, for both the Democrats and the Republicans have betrayed the basic principle of the Declaration of Independence. How succinctly put and how true. Remember, the Democrats were the party of the slaveholders. And after that, they were the Dixiecrats. Is that right? And the Republicans were not that much better, even though the original Republicans had fought and fought successfully to end slavery. They had become complicit with the Dixiecrats, the Southern, especially the Southerners, and they too had betrayed the hopes and dreams of the Negro. Remember, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a Democrat, but he had to compromise, negotiate with the Southern leaders who were in the Congress and who were chairman of the committees that Franklin Delano Roosevelt had to go through to get his New Deal passed. And the Southerners agreed that they would help Roosevelt get that New Deal passed if they promised there would be an exclusion and an exemption and an exception when it came to the Negroes. They said, we will handle the Negroes in our part of the country, y'all. So this program will be a federal program, but it will be managed at the local level. And so you thought Theodore Bilbo, the Honorable Congressman Theodore Bilbo, was going to look out for you and help you because you were black. You were extremely naive. I digress. I'm going to try to get through this. The revolution is a serious one. Mr. Kennedy has tried to take the revolution out of the streets and put it into the courts. Listen, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Congressman, listen, fellow citizen. The black masses are on the march for jobs and freedom, and we must say to the politician that there won't be a cooling off period. Can you imagine that kind of, if John Lewis had said that at that march on Washington way back there in 1963 to the Kennedy administration, why, it would have been a scandal. All right. Okay. So now we come to the most incendiary part. Listen what John Lewis would have said if they hadn't edited it out. He said, we won't stop now. All of the forces of Eastland, Barnett, Wallace, and Thurman, I forget Eastland's first name, J.O. Eastland, I think. Ross Barnett, that was Ross Barnett. He was the governor of one of the southern states. It slips my mind which one it was. Alabama. And no, it was another state, because George Wallace was the governor of Alabama. Strom Thurmond was all of these guys were rabid Dixiecrats, rabid race haters. And what John Lewis was saying in invoking their names, that they won't stop this revolution. The time will come when we will not confine our marching to Washington. We will march through the South, through the heart of Dixie, the way Sherman did. We shall pursue our own scorched earth policy and burn Jim Crow to the ground, non-violently. We shall fragment the South into 1,000 pieces and put them back together in the image of democracy. We will make the action of the past few months look petty. And I say to you, wake up, America. Can you imagine if John Lewis had given that speech at that day? Why, it would have been, it probably would have been cut off. Probably never would have got to that part. And that was the John Lewis that they just eulogized on yesterday. And so we who are left behind, as the Sweet Honey in the Rock sang the song, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. And so the conditions that he spoke about then, while the rabid explicit exhibitions of racism have been greatly toned down. If you study Leatt, we don't have to study Leatt, well, you just read what he said. And the same with John Ehrlichman. They tell you, that the rabid Dixiecrats like Bilbo and Rankin and all of that crowd, who were not chary, who were not ashamed to call you a nigger right on the House floor, the Democrat floor, the Senate, and it's in the record. Even Adam Clayton Powell had to protest against their wide and just gratuitous use of those racial slurs and invectives on the floor of the Honorable House of Representatives. And so as a result of those, the change, rather, in the Southern strategy, Richard Russell and Lee Atwater and that crowd, they began to say, we don't want to call them racial epithets and use racial slurs no more. We don't want to be that brutal in our presentation. We want to be more abstract. So they just stopped saying, we don't want Negroes in school with us. They started talking about taxes. See the difference? Talk about taxes. What am I buying? What am I getting for my taxes that I'm paying? See, my taxes are too high. I want to cut in my taxes. And Lee Atwater said we began to talk in the abstract all the time, knowing that the person who's going to get hurt the most would always be the Negro, because the Negro is on the bottom. I've gotten my signal for the last 5 minutes, and so I'm going to get ready to wrap this up. We want to begin talking about the health disparities. I'm reading a book right now by Dana Bowen Matthew entitled Just Medicine, Just Medicine. Emphasis on just, if we could get just fair. Because now we began to talk about the implicit bias that the medical personnel have, that when they walk into the office, or when you walk into the office, or they come into the emergency room or the operating room where a black person is there, just to be blunt, that the implicit bias may affect the range of health care that you as a person receive. I think he said that there are over 83,000, let me turn to this right quick, 83,570 minority patients die annually due to health care disparities. That means they didn't get good health care. The doctors were good, the doctors were trained, but they just didn't give good health care when it came to the black person. The doctors, the nurses, the attendants, the anesthesiologists, the technicians, even the phlebotomists. Sometimes they can't find your vein and they punch it in. Do you feel that pain? Yeah, I feel that pain. And all of those things, although you may find it laughable, it can have very tragic outcomes if you don't get good health care. The person doesn't feel like that you rate the level of health care that he was trained, or he or she was trained in the colleges and universities to render, but they want to render that to the other people. It's just like your boy Ben Carson. I'm wrapping up. He gave very few of those operations to black people. Those operations were for white people. He made big money. He was not a black person's neurosurgeon, in other words. You understand what I'm getting at. And so that he has that different implicit bias. I must wrap up. I encourage my brothers and my sisters to continue to pray much one for another. We must pray our way out of this pandemic. You can see that we're not going to get much help from the federal government. Even the CDC is dragging its feet. World Health Organization is shaking its head. And we're going to have to begin to pray that God would release us from this scourge, from this plague, from this pestilence, from this pandemic. Yes, God will answer prayer. 2 Chronicles 7:14 gives us that reassurance. And Jesus said men should always pray and not faint. Pray for our doctors, pray for our nurses, pray for our healthcare professionals, pray for our medical people, pray for our people that work in the stores, pray for our people that drive these vehicles and the trucks and the delivery people. Amen. And keep everybody lifted up in prayer, because it's going to take all of us praying together, pulling together, in order to get God to give us the release and deliverance that we must have. I say again, as I've always said, if you're working on a job and them folks don't want to pay you, your check is short, they're giving you comp and all that stuff. If they don't want to pay you, you know what you need to do? Don't work for them. God bless. Thank you, Doc. We out.